Hi everyone, it's a cold night here in New York City, and I've recently returned from being in Connecticut making flower pots with Guy Wolff. Actually, not just flower pots, we were making all kinds of things, some really fun things like soap dishes. And at the early part of my trip up there, there was a day where I was really struggling and I was getting very frustrated with myself trying to make a shape that I have made before and that I've made very well, but I hadn't done it in about a year. Guy showed me how to do it, and then I was trying, and it just wasn't working. And I just got so frustrated that I took a coffee break and I went in the house and I sat down, and as I was drinking the coffee, I thought, okay, what are you doing wrong, and how can you fix this? And I was just really determined. So I went back out to the pottery in the evening when we're usually not throwing, because I just really wanted to get it right. And then it started working. I was in there by myself. It was snowing outside. It was so beautiful up there. I had a CD on, one of my childhood favorites, Larry the Mechanic, The Visit. And I was just in my element. And when it was really working, when I was really making the shape properly, I was making pot after pot, and I'd cut it off the wheel and put it on a shelf opposite me. And there was a moment where I looked up at this shelf of pots that had been so nicely made, and I had a thought that I have often had, I've had for many years, and this is what I would like to talk to you about today. This is a thought that for some might sound depressing or morbid, but this has been something that has actually had the opposite effect on me. It's been a motivator. And that thought is how I'm going to feel at the end of my life. So this is something that I think started with me at a very young age, when I just realized and accepted, oh, you're alive now, but one day you won't be alive. And I think for me it started at Pioneer Village, when I would be in these old buildings from the 19th century, and we used all these old tools that were also from the 19th century. The spinning wheel I spun at had the year 1838 carved into the spinning wheel. And it kind of dawned on me at the age of 14, oh, the person that made and used the spinning wheel is dead. And now I'm using this spinning wheel, and I will also be dead one day. And that thought wasn't something that made me sad. It was just kind of a practical acceptance, because it was just very tactile at Pioneer Village, touching all these things that were used and loved and made by people who were long gone. And that kind of forced me to accept in a very real way that you're going to be there too. So as the years went on, that thought was something that I actually started thinking about in terms of a perspective. When the end comes, whenever that end is, what would you like to actually see? What would you like to look back at? And what will make you happy? And I didn't know. Like at that early age, I didn't know what that was. And I was also at that time experimenting with various religions. So this is why I felt like I was perfect for Life of Pi, because when I read that book, I was like, oh my God, I did exactly the same thing. I was born into a Hindu household. My aunt was a Pentecostal Christian, and my uncle converted to Christianity, and the two of them kept urging me to come to church with them, so I did. I went for about 4 years, and I would say I practiced Christianity, and I questioned a lot, and the questioning was coupled with reading. Going to church and going to the Hindu temple made me curious and made me realize I didn't know very much about these religions. So I started getting books and reading about them to make my own decisions. And I wondered if religion would really affect my feelings about the end of my life. And I know for many people who are religious that that really is what they associate with the end of their life. But when I had come to my own conclusions about how I felt, they were devoid of religion. I realized that when I look back at my life, whenever the end may come. And that was the other thing. I was very well aware that we have no idea when the end will come. I think we hope for a certain time for the end, like much later. But I realized and accepted that I will never know when that end is. So, given that we don't know when the end is, if it's tomorrow or 80 years from now, how will I feel looking back at my life? And what that started doing was making it much easier to choose. Because looking back from the end and asking myself, what would I like to see when I looked back, was coupled with, what do I want? What do I want from life? And sort of the big picture answers early on were, oh, I want to be in the movies, or I want to own a house. I want to be able to ride a horse. But the more I questioned myself, and the more I really genuinely sat with these thoughts and analyzed them, I would start asking why. Why do you want that? Why do you want to be in the movies? And I mean, it always went to an emotional place. Why do you want to be in the movies? Went with my own analyzing my motivations and thoughts, went to the cliche place, because I want to be loved. And this is what I did with all of my wants. And as I sat with this acceptance that life will come to an end, my life will come to an end, and what would I really like to feel whenever the end is near, is really understanding that what I wanted to feel was satiated. I wanted to feel like whenever the end comes, I'm thankful for the time that I was given and what I did with that time. And this is hard to talk about, and it's not hard to talk about for me because it's emotional, but it's hard to talk about because it's difficult for me to genuinely articulate the feelings. But I want to talk about them because I think it is something that is so useful and powerful. Thoughts about death are not thoughts that we want to have. We're not really taught to think about death, and we don't really talk about it. I mean, I didn't in our family. We didn't talk about how are we all going to feel when we die one day. It was just always avoided. But for me, being so fascinated by old things and old stories, it was something that I really accepted and incorporated into my life at an early age. And there came a point in my 20s when I started taking yoga where my instructor said in one of the classes, I mean, he was a real yogi, like old school. He would sit at the front and dictate the poses and then sort of give a lecture. And in one of his lectures, one of the lectures was about death. And he said that the science of yoga really teaches us to think about death early on, not 5 minutes before we die. Because avoiding that subject, it just doesn't work. And when the end is near, I used to record the classes and then play them so that I could practice at home. So this one lecture is just sort of ingrained in my head. He said that when the end is near, many people will be scared and they will be frantically searching for some kind of understanding and acceptance or coming to terms with the end. But because they haven't prepared, time runs out. And what he said was, the science of yoga teaches us to prepare, and not 5 minutes before we die, but as early as possible. It's never too early to start preparing in a healthy way. This is what I mean by this. Can sound morbid and depressing, but hearing that from him was a reinforcement of something that I had already been doing. And these thoughts about the end of my life, I'm sharing this because they've really, really helped me. They've helped me put into perspective what is important. And what is important has helped me make big and small decisions in my life. I've done things on a whim, like dropping out of university in my second year and booking a one-way plane ticket to India and flying there and spending 3 months in Pondicherry doing research for a part that I didn't know whether or not I would get it in a movie. And it was a crazy thing to do, but I knew that this was the sort of thing that whenever the end came, whether it was premature or mature, I would look back and I would be so glad that I did that. And that's one big example. But there's like small examples. And the small examples are the things that I feel have motivated me to create these videos and share with you. Small things like making your bed so nicely, incorporating things in your life that are filled with meaning, things that you touch and use every day, not saving your nice china, not putting it in the cupboard and keeping it for special occasions, but using it every day. And if it breaks, it breaks. So this is something that I have been cultivating, and I feel I have a healthy relationship with this acceptance of the end. That night in the pottery, when I say that I had this thought yet again, because when I looked over at that shelf of pots that made me so happy to see, I think I thought about the end, because I realized this is the sort of thing that I would like to be able to remember whenever the end comes. Making the pots was not about making money at all. Making those pots the way Guy makes the pots comes from this need, this hungry desire to create something beautiful with my hands. And this is something that I have understood I want from this life. I think when I analyzed my motivations, when it went closer and closer and closer to what I truly want inside, there's so much out there that's so beyond our control, just outside my front door when I step into the streets of New York City. But there is so much that is within my control here. And one of the things that I feel I can control is bringing beauty into my life, and then also having a hand of literally in creating something beautiful, whether it's making a flower pot that someone's going to plant with a plant, or playing the harp. I want to do it really, really, really well. I want to do it really well because when I do it really well, I see something extremely beautiful, and it makes me so satisfied. I see or hear something really beautiful, and it makes me feel like I've really achieved something. And these are the sorts of things that I feel have made my life so rich. That is the word that comes to mind. When I was a little kid, I was obsessed with these religious Hindu Tamil movies. I would like beg my mom or dad to put in a video cassette of one of them, and I would watch it like fixed to the TV screen. And there was one movie called Kandan Karune about Lord Muruga, who has a disciple. She's a poet, Avvayar, and this poet, we don't know if she's mythical or if she was many people say she actually lived, but she was a what do you call it, renunciate. She didn't want anything, so she just wandered around in a robe and would eat off of charitable donations, but she was a poet. and her thirst was for knowledge. And there's a scene in the movie that I loved when I was a kid where Lord Muruga appears before Avayar, and there's this line when she's singing about what she wanted, and she sings about wanting knowledge and being so grateful that it was given to her. And the metaphor she uses is, she says, Ali, Ali, unna, unna. Ali, Ali means to scrape and scrape, and unna, unna means to eat and eat. That this hunger for knowledge was so great that she scraped the last bits on the plate and just ate and ate. And that is the feeling that I had that night when I looked at those pots. The motivation was this hunger to be able to take the clay and to make a pot like Guy made. And it was so unquenchable for so long. And then from lots of hard work and dedication and instruction and care from my guru, I was able to do it. And when I looked at those pots, I just felt like this is what I will be so grateful for whenever the end comes. These things. And that has helped me so much, because it's genuinely given me something that I feel is a gauge. When I'm starting to stress out or worry about something, I stop and I think, is this worth it? In the end, is this thing worth this mental agony? And very often the answer is no. It's not. I almost died when I was 20 years old. It was very, very close. I was in a boat with some friends, and I was just learning how to swim, and I ended up in the water, and they swam off to jump off a cliff, and I thought I could get to the little island, and I couldn't, and I was going under, and there came a moment where I didn't come back up, and I had this flash of, oh, here it is, here's the end. And in that moment, it was overwhelmingly sad. I felt what it would feel like at the end. This overwhelming sadness that it's going to be over. But strangely, I felt like I also was given a choice. And I realized, no, do you want the very end to be sad or something else? And I thought, stop, this is the end. So don't feel sad. And the feeling that came to me was gratitude. I actually was thankful for my life so far and what I had experienced. And 3 little images flashed, like they actually flashed like within my sight. One was my little dog that was at home, a Shih Tzu named Misha, sighing and putting her head on her paws. Another one was of my mom, overcome with grief, crying. And then the last thing I saw was my bike, parked like by the side of the road. And then my friend pulled me out of the water. But that experience really was an affirmation that my cultivating, thinking about the end and working on it was effective. Because when the end was right there, I was able to go to this place that gave it closure in a way that made me happy. So that's me. My mom passed away about 5 years ago, and she did not have that closure. She got diagnosed with a very rare brain disease, and it hit her very quickly. And as she was declining, we could tell, because she even said, "What did I do to deserve this?" And as she got sicker and sicker, I could just see in her face that she was really struggling with accepting what was happening. And I can't make the presumptions of knowing what was in her head, but she and I had never talked about these things with each other. And that's one of the reasons why I'm talking about it now, because I do feel like Western society isn't really good at cultivating this dialogue in a healthy way. But if you're able to start thinking about the end and using it in a good way to look back and ask yourself, in those final moments, what would I like to feel? You can actually start right now. You can start right now with the little decisions, the decisions that you're making on a daily basis. Walk to work, take the subway. Truly, a decision like that, to me, is informed by the end. For me, every day is an opportunity to make a deposit into, I've used this metaphor before, every day is an opportunity to make a deposit into an account of sorts, a positive experience or a negative one. And even the most average, simple day is filled with the potential to be good based on all of the little decisions that you make. Use a plastic fork at work, or take a 19th century silver one from home in your bag so that you can eat your takeout lunch with a nice fork. That is something that I do. And these little things, they all add up. And I make these little deposits because I am very well aware that there will be an end. And I accept that. And I think I know now that for me, even now, I have achieved and received so much more than I have ever wanted. So it feels like this is all gravy. This is all gravy, and I'm so grateful for all of it. And I feel so lucky for all of it. And part of the motivation to make these videos comes from seeing it spread. So, not something that's easy to think about, but something that's worthwhile. And starting now, something I encourage everyone to do.